All right. Good evening, brothers. Welcome to Thursday
Good
night
evening.
series for the Scottish Rite. As we've said before, these aren't tiled, so please govern yourselves accordingly. I just started the recording, so let's behave ourselves for sure. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. We will take care of questions via the chat, or we'll cover them at the end. And at the end, there will be a survey link that I'll post into the chat, and I will also send it out via email later on in the next couple of days. Coming up schedule-wise, we have the introduction to the Kabbalah and intro to sacred geometry as well, along with a few other topics coming up. And now, I believe Tracy has made it back. Introduction to Hermeticism. Brother Tracy, it is all yours.
Thank you. Hello, brethren. My name is Tracy Anderson. For those who have never met, I'm pretty new to Masonry in general. I was just raised in the Blue Lodge last May of last year. And then that winter, I went through the Scottish Rite. I've grown up in a Masonic family, and my father was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason. And what's interesting is growing up, I never knew much about Masonry, but now having gone through it, I now kind of understand growing up, the teachings that my parents have instilled upon me. So those of you who are parents and use the teachings of Masonry for your kid, it does really, really work. So I just wanted to mention that. I've always been a very analytically minded kid. Grew up in doing science. Was always the rational guy, very skeptical. And what I will tell you is that the more I've learned in the past 25 years about doing science, the more these ancient philosophies really make sense to me. And so I just wanted to say that for those of you who, take the esoteric stuff, you can take it with a grain of salt, but it truly does have relevance in today's modern world. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see the first slide then?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So Hermeticism, this is going to be a brief introduction. We're going to be talking about the history, the relevance to Freemasonry, and how we can use these teachings as tools to transform ourselves into better people. This title slide shows what's known as the Philosopher's Stone. Many people will recognize this circle, triangle, and square with two people inside. Make of man and woman a circle, thence a square, thence a triangle. Form a circle around the three, and you will have the Philosopher's Stone. We're going to be getting into what the Philosopher's Stone may or may not mean, and how you can use the teachings of that for your own self. Before we get into the heart of this, I just wanted to make a comment regarding science, religion, spirituality, and esotericism, which is also called the occult. And I don't mean to say occult being a pejorative term. Occult simply means hidden. A lot of these mysteries were hidden for good reason. And so whenever you see that term, don't think poorly of it. And I'm not here to suggest that you blindly accept what the truth is. And I think I'm speaking for all the brethren on the educational committee that that we're not here to tell you what is true and what's not true. We're here to help sort of give you some ideas and provide discussion, because our own collective truths can provide wisdom and value to the rest of us. And like I say, esoteric subjects can be powerful tools for personal transformation. So my personal goal is to help instruct myself and my brethren in these cryptic occult motifs that are present in Masonic ritual. This is the screenshot shows there's a recent article in Forbes magazine about why some of these ancient teachings are actually relevant today in leadership. And right now we're in a time of darkness and uncertainty, and in these times of darkness, ancient wisdom provides us with answers. They can help you find a glimmer of hope in the darkness and be that light to shine the way forward and lead others out of the myriad of challenges. And I take it to heart that out of discord comes harmony, out of chaos comes calmness, and out of confusion comes clarity. And when one studies history, it suggests that there will be a renaissance again after this pandemic. So why is Hermeticism important to Freemasons in the first part? Well, Manly Hall, in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, said, Hermes is of first importance to Masonic scholars because he was the author of the Masonic initiatory rituals, which were borrowed from the mysteries established by Hermes. Nearly all Masonic symbols are Hermetic in nature. Albert Pike, it wouldn't be a Scottish Rite presentation without an Albert Pike quote. And in Esoterica, Albert Pike says, the master of the lodge was Hermes. In man is the divine word, the voice and utterance of the divine wisdom. Every human intellect has in it something of the divine nature. Hermes had a couple nice quotes of himself, and one is, the soul is an eternal and intelligent essence, having thought her own reason. The intellectual spirit, which is in us, being free, the intellectual reason is free also, always identical with itself and independent of destiny. And finally, beneath nature and the ideal world is placed the pyramid. Its cornerstone placed on its summit is the creative word of the universal Lord, which after him is the first power, uncreated, infinite, begotten of him, and antecedent to all his creations. So we get into what's the definition of Hermeticism, and we can think of it as a religious, philosophical, and esoteric tradition that's based primarily upon writings that are attributed to this person known as Hermes Trismegistus. Trismegistus translates to thrice greatest Hermes, and we're going to be going into what makes him thrice greatest in a bit. The writings have greatly influenced the Western esoteric tradition and were considered to be of great importance both during the Renaissance and the Reformation. And the tradition traces its origin to a Prisca Theologia, which is an ancient theology that affirms the existence of a single true theology that is present in all religions and that was given by God to man in antiquity. So Hermetic philosophy is one of the oldest religious and philosophical traditions, and it's a synthesis of religion, philosophy, which flourished in ancient Egypt. Hermeticism was not embodied in a single religious group, but it was a system at the root of many traditions, some of which are still alive today. Like I say, it's a blend containing Egyptian religion, philosophy, science, magic. It's got elements of Greek paganism, Alexandrian Judaism, Sumerian religion, and Zoroastrianism. And it's also associated with schools of philosophical schools such as Platonism, Neoplatonism, Stoicism, and Pythagoreanism. Hermes is considered the founder of science, religion, mathematics, geometry, alchemy, philosophy, medicine, and magic. So that's quite a resume to have. So the Hermetic philosophy, when you read about it, it's so radically compatible with old traditions and including religions of today like Judaism, Christianity, and Gnosticism. And when you get into history, you learn that so many wars were waged because of this idea of an enlightened wisdom versus a narrow-minded dogma. And this conflict between, being open, having a free mind versus narrow-minded dogma, and that is the reason that Hermeticism, Freemasonry, and other practices of ancient wisdom were driven into secrecy. Getting back to the Prisca Theologia, which says there is but one ancient theology, um, what this does is it frees your mind to consider all sources of wisdom on an equal basis without any preconceived ideas. The problem with ingrained intolerance that's associated with a lot of religions is it's common for one sect to be at war with others, even though the differences in thought between all of these religions are not extreme enough to warrant the degree of conflict we see on an ongoing basis. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, we have more in common than we think we do, and we it's important that we put ourselves into other people's shoes when, whether we're diving into different belief systems or not. Okay, so who is Hermes? To begin talking about Hermes, we have to begin with the Egyptian god Thoth. Thoth is credited by the Egyptians as being the author of all works of science, philosophy, religion, wisdom, and magic. And it's believed that he would have been an Egyptian priest, king, and philosopher who lived between around 2000 to 1200 BC. He's credited to have written somewhere between 20,000 and 36,000 works, of which 42 were kept in the Great Library of Alexandria. Unfortunately, only a small handful of his texts remain today. Francis Barrett says of Hermes, by the way, from now on, you can kind of use the term Hermes and Thoth interchangeably. The Hermeticists in the Western tradition sort of used Thoth's teachings to be an amalgamation with the Greek Hermes. So you can use these names interchangeably. So he said, if God ever appears in man, he appeared in him, as is evident both from his books and his Pymander, which is called the Corpus Hermeticum. Like I say, he's a combination of the Egyptian god Thoth, of wisdom, learning, and communications, and the Greek god Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Manly Hall writes, while in probability there actually existed a great sage and educator by the name of Hermes, it's impossible to extricate the historical man from the mass of legendary accounts which attempt to identify with the cosmic principle of thought. So I leave it up to you whether or not, was there really a person named Hermes who came up with this amazing, vast amount of wisdom. Like I say, he may have been an actual living king, philosopher, and priest, as well as sage, scientist, and sorcerer. He was known by many names and was considered to be an amalgamation of several people and mythological figures of ancient history. The main function of the incarnations of Hermes is to transcribe the word of God, and his main symbol, as you can see in this photo, is the caduceus, or the serpent staff. In this painting of Moses, we can see another caduceus here. The brass serpent was set on a pole so that if a serpent had bitten any man when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. So in 1460, a monk brought a Greek manuscript to Florence, and this codex contained 14 treatises attributed to Thoth or Hermes. And that caused quite a stir because Hermes was held to be older than Plato and Moses, and was the underlying inspiration of all philosophy and religion that followed him. The manuscript contained the Corpus Hermeticum, along with some astrological and alchemical works that were also named after Hermes. Together, the works became the fundamental writings of the Renaissance, called Hermeticism. The texts were preserved in Greek and appear to have been produced between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD in Alexandria, Egypt. The Corpus Hermeticum was initially thought to be dated after the beginning of the Christian era, and because of that, Hermetic writings lived on in secret societies such as the Freemasons and Rosicrucians. However, in 1945, there was a discovery made of Hermetic writings in Egypt that proved that some of these existed before the beginnings of the Christian era, and there also existed a secret society akin to a Masonic lodge. So in these early secret societies, members of this group called themselves brethren. They were initiated through a baptism of the Spirit. They greeted each other with a sacred kiss, celebrated a sacred meal, and read the Hermetic writings as edifying treatises for their spiritual progress. The Hermetic believer was initiated to several grades before transcending the sphere of the 7 planets and the heaven of the fixed stars. Then he would behold the God beyond and experience himself. The Hermeticists were influenced by Platonists, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism, and used philosophical language to express fundamentally religious teachings. When you do some searching about Hermeticism, what you'll find comes up a lot is the Kabbalion, and it sounds like Kabbalah, and they both are not related to each other, even though they sound similar. The Kabbalion is a publication that was published in 1908, and it was published by anonymous writers called the Three Initiates. Nobody knows who these people were. But it claims to be a distillation of Hermetic philosophy with 7 basic principles. And I do highly recommend reading the Kabbalion and using these tools, because when you apply these to your daily lives, they can really make sense in profound ways. And they're going to, like I say, with any of this, it's going to affect different, your truth is your own truth. And how it's just like a piece of art, how we decipher these is a very personal thing. So the 7 aspects of the Kabbalion starts with mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. So everything that happens has to be a result of a mental state that precedes it. For anything to exist, thoughts had to form first, which then form physical reality or manifestation. Your thoughts are seeds, and they plant positive seeds in your mind garden. Correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above. This expresses the idea that there's always a correspondence between the phenomena of various planes of being and life. There's a harmony which can be made, and agreement and corresponding between the planes that are delineated as the great physical plane, the great mental plane, and the great spiritual plane. And this is where we talk about there being a microcosm and a macrocosm. Now, just an aside, the type of scientific work I do is microscopy, which means I use very high-powered microscopes to sort of get into the atomic level of things. I also dabble a little bit of astronomy. Once you realize the beauty that's present in the microscope, under the microscope and under the telescope, you really get a sense that there is sort of this pattern that exists in nature. And numerology, we're going to be getting into numerology later on and discuss some of that in a future topic. Vibration, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This figure shows a water molecule and the different ways water molecules bounce around, stretch. That's why water is the way it is. But things such as metals or glass, those atoms are moving as well, even though we think of it as just a solid form. So everything is in motion, nothing rests. Polarity talks about how everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. All manifested things have 2 sides, 2 aspects, or 2 poles. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half truths, and every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything. Opposites are identical in nature, yet different in degree. Um, and so, you can even study modern physics, and this polarity exists when we talk about, particle theory in physics. Rhythm. So everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. So there's motion everywhere, and things swing backwards and forwards. Think about the tides that are rolling in every day. Cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Um, it also, to a certain extent, states that there is no such thing as chance. Chance is merely a term indicating extant causes not recognized or perceived. Principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. So without the feminine, this says the masculine is apt to act without restraint, order, or reason, resulting in chaos. The feminine alone, on the other hand, is apt to constantly reflect and fail to actually do anything, resulting in stagnation. So with both the masculine and feminine working in conjunction, there is thoughtful action that breeds success, which points out that both the feminine and masculine fulfill each other. So getting back to the thrice greatest, there's some debate as to where Hermes got this epithet thrice greatest. Probably the most historical is when you actually translate the Egyptian text, Megistau kai Megistau thou megalu hermau. It roughly translates to the greatest and the greatest god, great Hermes. So there we have just a repetition of the adjective. So also Hermes is credited with the creation of astrology, alchemy, and theurgy. When it comes to astrology, it says that Hermes was influenced by Zoroaster, which is a Middle Eastern philosopher that lived in the 2nd millennium BC. Manly Hall in Secret Teachings of All Ages mentions that he was the greatest of all philosophers. He was the greatest of all priests and the greatest of all kings. And Albert Pike in Esoterica says, it was one deity in Trinity. It was intelligible light before intelligible light. It was always mind shining forth from mind, and its unity was sought other than spirit embracing the all things. So now we're going to be getting into just quickly some historical and mythological figures associated with Hermes Trismegistus. So these are beings or figures that are in writings after the original characterization of Hermes Trismegistus, or during. First, again, Thoth. So this goes back to ancient Egyptian religion. Then we have Hermes, which originated with the Greeks. We have Mercury, which was in Roman paganism. Enoch, present in Judaism and Christianity. Idris, which is found in Islam. This painting shows Idris experiencing heaven and hell. And Moses, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And then Akhenaten, Egyptian pharaoh, is often written to be the same as Hermes, as well as Nabu, found in Babylonian texts. So there was, unfortunately, with all of these writings, they were destroyed early on in the Alexandrian library, unfortunately, and they then shifted to the Islamic world in about 400 to 600 AD. They reemerged in medieval Europe into the Renaissance. And unfortunately, Emperor Constantine and his successors, they erased almost every trace of Hermeticism from 312 AD and into well into the 6th century, putting to death thousands of Hermeticists and destroying templates and sacred texts. As and being opposed by the church, the Hermetic tradition was forced to the occult underground, and permeates Western esoteric traditions. The reason it was driven into secret societies is because of this persecution, and this includes secret societies such as the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Thelema, as well as modern paganism, New Age, and Wicca. Now, I wanted to talk, since I'm a scientist, I wanted to talk about the influence of the scientific revolution. And I would like to argue that without Hermeticism, we wouldn't have science as it is known today, nor possibly would we have had the Renaissance. The Renaissance truly thrived due to this open-mindedness that are in these Hermetic writings. Now, most people, without even knowing about Hermeticism, have heard the term hermetically sealed, which is to magically, quote unquote, seal a box or chest in such a way that it could never be opened. This is related to the alchemists, and alchemists were Hermeticism greatly influenced the alchemists. And the alchemists essentially created the pharmacies, the world's first pharmacies, and they invented glassware, and the glassware needed to be sealed up, and then that's where we get the term hermetically sealed. There's also this invention called the Magdeburg hemispheres, which I've illustrated here. They're a pair of large copper hemispheres with mating rims, and they were used to demonstrate the power of atmospheric pressures. So when early scientists studied the atmosphere, they used this hermetically sealed device. They sealed it with grease, and the air was pumped out, and it could contain a vacuum that could not be pulled apart by teams of horses. So when it's hermetically sealed, it's very airtight. Pythagoras was said to be an initiate into the Hermetic arts, and which he studied in Egypt. And Plato was deeply influenced by Pythagoras and was also inspired by the Hermetic teachings. And some claim he also studied with the Egyptian masters. And both Pythagoras and Plato were very influential to early modern scholars of the scientific revolution. Aristotle was a student of Plato, and he studied at Plato's Academy in Athens. He then went on to teach Alexander the Great, who conquered Egypt in 331 and founded Alexandria, which was a hub for alchemy and Hermeticism. And contrary to popular belief, Hermeticism, mysticism, and natural magic had a huge influence on the scientific revolution. And again, this began in the Renaissance period. So the scientific revolution embraced empiricism, reason, and open inquiry. This over faith, mysticism, or dogma. So ironically, the Renaissance saw a resurgence of Hermetic ideas, as well as in mythical, metaphorical, and magical ways of thinking. And so indeed, the fathers of modern science and the scientific method were deeply religious, and many were alchemists and esotericists that were rooted in Hermeticism. And the works can be seen in luminaries such as Nicholas Copernicus, Kepler, Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, and as well as medieval philosophers, as well as Islamic philosophers like Al-Kindi and Avicenna. And here's a title page from The Skeptical Chemist, which was written by Robert Boyle in 1661. And those of you who've taken any chemistry will know Robert Boyle was a huge father of chemistry. Nicholas Copernicus, he was the first who presented the first predictive mathematical model of a heliocentric system. And he describes the sun in this writing. In the middle of all sits the sun enthroned. In this beautiful temple could we place this luminary in any better position from which he can illuminate the whole at once. He is rightly called the lamp, the mind, the ruler of the universe. Hermes Trismegistus names him the visible god. Sophocles Electra calls him the all-seeing. So the sun sits as upon a royal throne, ruling his children, the planets which circle around him. Now at work, I'm also a safety officer, so I was a little hesitant to put this photo up of Isaac Newton, the alchemist. Doesn't look like he was using proper safety protocols here in his lab. But many people don't know that Isaac Newton was an alchemist, and he was he dived into occult wisdom of the ancients, including the Corpus Hermeticum and the Emerald Tablet. He was a devout scholar and practitioner of alchemy, and this greatly influenced his scientific work, including the laws of motion, the theory of gravity, his work on optics, and the invention of calculus. And getting into the Emerald Tablet, photographed is a depiction of what the Emerald Tablet may have looked like if it truly existed. And what it describes is the healing philosopher's stone, otherwise called the Lapis Philosophorum. And this philosopher's stone was made of a mysterious material called material prima. It contains opposites still incompatible and in the most violent conflict. It is gradually guided towards a redeemed state of perfect harmony. Now, here's where the work really begins. You can study what may seem a very simple, short tablet known as the Emerald Tablet. However, it's sort of the magnum opus in that how you use allegory to apply this to your life is truly the philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone is not something, it's often just a lot of people think of the philosopher's stone as, transforming gold into lead, or lead into gold. And what it really is, it's an allegorical philosophy on how to transform your own life into something better. So I would highly encourage my brethren to, sit down and read about the philosopher's stone and think of how, these ideas manifest in the world today. When we think about the world today, it's mysterious. It contains opposites that are incompatible. We have violent conflict. And so how we take that information and move towards this harmonious state is sort of all about Hermeticism. And in how to create the philosopher's stone, and again, this is highly riddled with allegory. So you can use this in terms of, you can chemically do alchemy and create a philosopher's stone. You can also use this to transform your own mind within into something higher than it was before. So how to create it? First, we bring together, then we putrefy. We break down what has been putrefied. We purify the divided. We unite the purified and harden it. In this way is one made from man and woman. And Hermes said it ascends from earth to heaven, by which words the circulating distillation is most beautifully explained, as also this, that the chemical vessel is made or arranged in the same way as the natural vessel. For we see or find that the whole heavens and the elements are like a sphere, round and sweet in nature, in whose midpoint or innermost essence the heat of subterranean fire is very strong and powerful, which drives the more subtle matter of the elements upward into the air, and at the same time rises upward itself. You can find t-shirts with the Philosopher's Stone. This is a very cool t-shirt you can find online. But when you distill the Philosopher's Stone down into its allegory about it can truly provide your life with richness, immortality, and infallibility, or move towards that. The philosopher's stone is made in the image of the creation of the world, for one must have its chaos and its prime matter, in which the elements float hither and thither, all mixed together, until they are separated by the fiery spirit. And when this happened, the light is lifted up, while the heavy is brought downwards. And although there is a link between the celestial and terrestrial realms in Hermeticism, as above, so below, there's a central idea of progress, of knowledge, and advancement of learning. In the Hermetic tradition, nature is investigated through observation, experiment, and illumination. The purpose is to discover and detect that which is invisible and hidden, and the hidden linkages between things. So Hermeticism endeavors to discover the influence of one thing over another, to understand phenomena and how to learn how to manipulate them. Paracelsus was a Swiss physician, and he coined the term the dose makes the poison. He was the founder of toxicology, and he had an affinity for Hermetic and Pythagorean philosophy, and he advocated that the final arbiter for a theory should be experience, and that humility and diligent labor is necessary. So along with our experiences, we have to work hard to sort of take these allegories and use them for our own purposes. In science, a phenomenon that is being observed and is separated from the soul and the internal value system of the observer. When science observes a phenomenon, it assumes that its nature, the perceptual, is the actual. However, in the modern fields of relativistic and quantum physics, observation affects the process being observed with a different outcome than if the process were unobserved. In fact, those who know Einstein's E equals mc squared, you don't have to think of c as the speed of light. C is actually the speed of causality, and it has to do with the perception. In order for you need an observer in place in order to understand these natural processes. And in Hermeticism, that is which is being studied is a reflection of the observer, and the two are intrinsically linked. So again, and as above, oops, let me go back. As above, so below, the universe is a symbolic reflection of what is happening inside of ourselves. And the quest for knowledge becomes a spiritual journey to return to a state of unity with the divine, known as the great work of humankind. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up. And I just want to wish my brethren good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Be a voice of peace and wisdom for all. All are one, as above, so below. And these are my sources, and I'll keep that up for a second in case anybody wants to make a screenshot. Okay, and then very, very quickly, I just wanted to point out just a couple of books if people want to dive into this further. One book I recommend for all Masons is The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. It's an amazing deep dive into all of these ancient histories. Everything I talked about is its own rabbit hole, and you can just dive deep into the rabbit hole. And it was actually quite difficult to put all this into a brief presentation, just because there is so much information. And then another good book, a more recent work by Brother Jamie Paul Lamb. This is Myth, Magic, and Masonry. And this is a short read. It's got some very interesting perspectives in Freemasonry related to the ancient mysteries. And then finally, Alchemy and Mysticism. This is put on by the Hermetic Museum. And this book has an amazing number of early paintings, and these paintings are just amazing. The amount of symbolry within them, you can just dive into them and learn so much from each of these figures. So with that, I will open up with any questions. If anybody has any, I'll try to answer.
First, I'd like to jump in and say thank you, Brother Tracy, for doing that presentation. And I have posted the clap clap. I have posted the survey form on the chat, so please, if you guys get a chance, go ahead and fill that out. And as Brother Tracy said, we were open for questions. I don't have any in the chat, but please unmute and ask your questions if you would like.
Brother Anderson,
Yes.
thank you so very much for this presentation today. It's been very brief, super informative, and enlightening. You mentioned something about your personal work, which attracted much attention for me as far as your work with microscopes and stuff. I will send you a request on Facebook. I'll find you. I'm pretty sure you're there. Am I right?
Yes, go ahead. I'm Tracy Anderson on Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to send you a message away from here and just to see if there is a time where, if you have some free time where I'm really interested in looking at things under the microscope, and I haven't had an opportunity. It's not close to anything I do for a living. So just want to say thank you, but I will certainly send you a friend request, and I'll be sending you a message in regards to that. If there's an opportunity, I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, my work looking both under the microscope and through the telescope. I do some art on the side as well, because this beauty, the patterns that are in nature. We talk about this divine geometry, which is going to be another subject we'll be covering. It's mind blowing as a scientist. The more you learn about science, the more one sees that there's this intelligent pattern that permeates life, and it's just amazing. So thank you very much for your comments.
Definitely, thank you.
Brother Tracy, Dave Camp here. You said your father was a 33rd in the Scottish Rite in South Dakota, where you were born?
Yes. Now, I'm pretty sure he was 33rd. My mother is adamant that he was 33rd, so I'm taking, I've never seen his actual certificate, but I'm told he was. He was at least 32nd. But yes.
Very, very good.
And my mother was a part of the Order of the Eastern Star.
Very good. Reach out offline, and I know some folks. I assume that would be in South Dakota.
Correct, near Yankton, South Dakota.
We can help you do some digging, my friend.
Good. I've actually been meaning to do that, so I appreciate you reminding me that's something that I want to do.
We'd be happy to point you in some good directions.
Thank you.
Great presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done tonight.
Tracy, I just have to ditto everyone else here. Thank you so much for putting on this presentation. It was very illuminating. I think you did a very good job of summarizing such a large and deep thing to discuss in such a 45-minute presentation. Very well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I tried to keep it as short as I could, but there's just so much that's so much to the subject. It's hard to not include something.
Well, thank you again. Just to wrap up here quickly, the upcoming schedule, we have sessions every Thursday up until the 15th of October, and then we get into our degree cycle after that. And again, I posted the survey link into the chat. You'll be getting that same link via email here in the next couple of days. And please come and register for one of the upcoming sessions. And with that said, I am going to stop the recording. And there we go.